Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Denzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I am your host, Ed Denzel, and it was a little bit of a crazy weekend. I wish I could tell you all about it. Some personal stuff. You know, my parents are here. I think everything in the end got sorted out just fine. But it appears now that because of some physical issues that my mother has been having, that she and my dad are going to have to go back to Pennsylvania a little earlier than they thought. Let's just put it that way. So I think that there have been some things going on, in particular with my mother, some health issues that she's been ignoring. And I think they just, it's nothing having to do with her mind, with her heart. She doesn't have any tumors or anything like that, but just some things have been building up to the point where they couldn't be ignored anymore, and had to make some plans to get them back to a place in Pennsylvania where they live where this stuff can be all sorted out. So in the next few days, I, along with my dad, we're going to make that happen. And I'll be sad to see them go, but my mother's health is most important. And frankly, I have plans to go up and see her and my dad in June anyway. So I'm sure that time will get here very fast. So there's that. I think everything, though, this weekend, like I said, hectic weekend, a little bit of an emotional weekend, but in the end, I think we came out here on Monday in a better spot than we were on Friday, which is important. It's important. I should tell you that, I was even talking to my mother. Really, my mom and my dad, despite being in their 70s, have had pretty, healthy lives, despite them being smokers until they were like 50, and them both being a little bit overweight for a long time. They haven't been in the hospital that much, haven't really had any health scares or anything like that. And I my dad's 79 years old, and I'm very fortunate for that. But when these things pop up, at their age, you really have to get to them soon. All right, so I don't want to get into it more than that, but I think she's going to be fine. It's just she has to get the proper care under the right circumstances, but she's not in any pain. Heart's great, mind's great, her sense of humor and all that stuff is there. I don't think that she's dying anytime soon, but just have to get her back to Pennsylvania with the doctors and specialists that my parents are familiar with. So there's that. Getting maybe to the political side of things very lightly before we jump into the deep end. It was funny. I go to a writers group on Mondays, and I go to actually two different writers groups. One is every Monday morning, and the other one is every other Tuesday evening. And the one on Monday mornings is mostly old people, retirees. I'd say the average age is easily 60-something years old. But the other one, I'm still probably one of the younger people there, but the average age I think is a little younger than that. But I'm sitting there, and it's amazing to me that in casual situations, how much I go to avoid. The lengths I'll go to not talk about politics. I know these people kind of just for the couple months that I've been going to this writers group, but they surely don't know that I do this show. I don't bring it up. They don't know what my politics are. The next book, The Comebacks, which I'm reading at this writers group, doesn't have a lot to do with politics at all. It's more about faith and miracles and things like that. So two of the women there started talking about Donald Trump, and I wouldn't say there was an argument, but the one woman who was a Donald Trump supporter was going to try and explain herself, and then there was another guy that jumped in, and then a woman who I know, she readily admitted one of the first times that I admitted her that she's a Democrat, and I just In fact, I think I even mentioned that on this show. It was like a couple months ago now, maybe early February, maybe late January. Didn't let her on. I didn't say, oh, really? Well, I'm a conservative. I didn't say anything like that. I was like, oh, really? Oh, okay. So she couldn't understand why this woman, and I just spoke up, and, we're all there to talk about writing and analyze each other's work and try to get better. So here I am. This is the funny part. Here I am, the guy who does a political talk show 5 days a week, have been doing this for almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years in June. And I have to speak up and said, people, and these are a bunch of people who are like 20 years older than I am. I have to speak up and say, do we really want to get into this here? I didn't take a side, and that kind of brought the political discussion to an end. So if for all of you who don't know me, and most of you have never met me, maybe never will meet me, that's kind of the guy I am outside of talking on this microphone. I think I brought this up before in other situations in my life where other people bring up politics, and it's in an environment that I think is inappropriate, and I just won't have anything to do with it. So that was kind of funny. Here I am, the political guy, trying to jump in and divert everything back to the reason that we're all supposed to be there, and that is to talk about our writing, because that's the only reason I'm there. I'm not there to hang out. I'm there to listen to other people and help their writing, and for them to help me. Other than that, that's the only reason I'm there. I'm not there to make friends, even though I'm friendly with the people. Same way it goes with the other writers group. So that was kind of funny. That should give you a little bit of insight into my personality. So let's jump in to the deep end. Here Trump was. This is going to be something that we never Trump people are going to have to deal with for the foreseeable future. As long as Donald Trump looks like he's going to get the nomination, and even when he gets the nomination, if he gets it, not when, but if, we're going to have to put up with those people who are liberals who are also anti-Trump people. As you all know, if you agree with me in the hashtag Never Trump, which is very popular on Twitter now, that usually means conservatives, Republicans, once again, usually to the conservative side, maybe not as conservative as I am, but somewhat conservative, saying, yeah, we don't want to have anything to do with Donald Trump. There might even be some moderates in there who don't want to vote for Donald Trump that are also part of it. But my belief is that your average Never Trump person in the Republican Party is conservative. However, we have to remember, that group of us, we have to remember that there's another group out there that is also anti-Trump, is against him getting the nomination or becoming president, and those are people on the left. And the reason I bring this up is maybe some of you saw this past weekend, Donald Trump was going to a speaking engagement on the outskirts of Arizona, a place called Fountain Hills. Now, the reason I know Fountain Hills is not that I've been in Phoenix many times in my life, many times. Used to go down there for work when I lived in Las Vegas, so I'm familiar with the city. I don't believe I've been in the Fountain Hills area, though. The reason I know Fountain Hills is because they have a huge disc golf tournament there every year. In fact, that tournament was just a couple weeks ago. There is a huge disc golf course there around this fountain, water, weaving between all these buildings there, apartment complexes. That's where it is. This tournament is called the Memorial. But he was in that area, and he got blocked. The roads got blocked. And I think he eventually made it to the venue, but there was a huge backup, all these people protesting him. And the general story was, look at all these anti-Trump people blocking the roads and everything. And I can tell you right now that I'm sure a lot of people who saw that story thought of us never Trump people, us conservative never Trump people, where that wasn't the case. Those people who were blocking those roads, all liberals. We know as conservatives, we don't block roads. We don't do that. We know who we are. We know we can protest and carry signs as well as any group out there, but we don't block roads. We make it a point not to block commerce because we're a big fan of commerce. And I think as we go forward, if Trump is going to continue to be a force in politics and whatever happens from now through the convention and after that, we're going to have to continue to differentiate ourselves from them. Because I can tell you this right now, that Trump supporters are going to try to portray us Republicans, even though they are Republicans too, they're going to try to portray us because they're so devoted to Donald Trump. They're going to portray us as being those people who are also out there blocking roads, and we know we weren't. The groups that were out there, they're out there protesting Donald Trump for entirely different reasons than we dislike Donald Trump. They are going to the extreme with believing that he is a racist. And I will tell you for the record, I don't believe that Donald Trump is a racist. I just believe that he's just a bad guy. The reason he retweets stuff from skinhead organizations is just because he wants to. And he thinks that's controversial. And he knows he's going to get attention from it. I don't know if he believes any of it. Who knows what Donald Trump believes? And that's, even though I've brought that up, it's not even the real reason that many conservatives are against him. We find that despicable, but we found him despicable before any of that started to happen. Whereas those people are out there because of the attention that Donald Trump has drawn to himself. And dare I say it, if Ted Cruz were to happen to somehow get the nomination by whatever means, that they'll probably be out there striking against him too and trying to block his path. It's just that these groups know right now that if they're out there in protesting Donald Trump, that's how they're going to get the most attention. And then on top of the fact, the things that Donald Trump has done. So we're gonna have to watch that very carefully. That unfortunately there is another group out there that kind of thinks like we do, but we share nothing in common with them otherwise. But I know that the media is going. I know it's going to try, and all of those outlets that have given Donald Trump a pass. You're going, and probably maybe some websites that you go to and you're not going to like it. They're going to try to portray these groups as being both of the left and the right, of both those anti-Trump people who are just liberals and then those principled conservatives who can't vote for him just because they think he's a liberal. And that's what, of course, makes this all so confusing. That really, truthfully, you know, the funny part is that those people who blocked those roads yesterday or this weekend probably have more in common with Donald Trump than we do. And we're the ones who aren't blocking the roads. That's what makes it so fascinating. And I'm going to say it again. If you're a political scientist living right now, you have enough papers for peer review for like the next decade, if not more. And especially if Donald Trump gets elected, you're just going to have a wealth of information. You're never going to have to go digging for information and find some obscure topic to write about ever again. You're just going to be able to just watch the news and you're going to be fine. So I just wanted to bring that up. That's something we're going to have to keep an eye on, because I know there's going to be media out there that are going to try to mix us never Trump people with those militant anti-Trump leftists out there. Just have to make sure we keep knowing that there is a difference and try to explain ourselves any way we can, how we are different from them. Let's move on to something else. Salah Abdeslam. The guy, I'm just going to call him Salah. What is it? Abdesalam. I wish these, trust me, I wish these terrorists had easier names. Why can't they just be Smith and Jones? Anyway, Salah Abdeslam was caught this week, and actually he was caught on Friday. And, I mean, that's good news. I'm very happy to hear it. There was a shootout. Some of his other fellow terrorists were killed. This happened in Brussels. And right now, the French authorities are trying to get him transferred back to France. Of course, you can imagine that his Abdeslam, his lawyers are fighting against that. I don't know. I think in the end, France is going to get their shot at him. Not maybe a literal shot, but we'll see. And that's all good news. Now, what you need to understand about this first is that when this happened the end of last week, the authorities that were doing a search for this area were not expecting to come across him. They were there. They were looking for terrorists, and they had some evidence, or they had some information that there was some terrorist activity, organizing, planning going on in the area. And they just happened upon this guy, and this is one of the guys who was involved in the Paris attacks. And we can remember when I talked about this, this was the guy that I had mentioned, and I wasn't, of course, the only one. I'm just getting information from other places, that got away. He was supposed to be, it seems, one of the guys who was supposed to blow himself up at that soccer game that was between Germany and France. Remember that? And they kept everybody in the stadium. Remember, you've seen the video going back to that time. You heard those two explosions go off, and they kept playing the game. He was also supposed to blow himself up there. We didn't do it. And he threw the vest off somewhere. He's been portrayed in the news as being somewhat of a chicken. He chickened out. And he was on the run, and the cops were looking for him in Europe, and their idea was that he had fled the country, fled France, fled Belgium, and went back to the safety of the Middle East and Syria, somewhere like that. Well, it turns out there's a very good possibility that he never left the area at all. That's the suspicion right at this time, that somehow he managed to eventually get back to where they found him, and he just lived low for all these months. Remember, that happened in November, so it's December, January, February, almost through March, 3-4 months of him living in Belgium. All the while, the cops are thinking that he went out somewhere, he left the country. Now, it's very possible he went to the Middle East and came back. They're just not sure about that. But he got caught. He got hit and shot in the leg. And they're going to try to interrogate him to find out what he knows. And I once again tell you that they didn't expect to catch him. Now, what's distressing about all this, and this is why, if you're a Muslim listening to the show, or you have Muslim friends, or whatever else, this is what drives us non-Muslims nuts. That this guy was able to live in this Muslim neighborhood of Brussels for at least a few months, whether it was after the attacks or since he came back, or maybe he was there the whole time, and nobody said anything. Can you Muslims now, does it even, as an atom within your brain, does it even form that idea, this idea as small as an atom, does it ever formulate itself to say, oh yeah, that's why those people, they're so suspicious of us? Because I refuse to believe that these people living around him didn't know that he was there. And in fact, in the article that at Fox News where I was reading, I read several different stories, different places. He was found in an apartment building only 500 yards, which is 1,500 feet, which is just over a quarter of a mile, a little over a quarter of a mile from the house, home, apartment that he grew up in. And nobody over in that area said a word for all of these nuts. So maybe somehow recently somebody finally spoke up, talked to the Belgian police, the Brussels police, who then talked to the French police, and they got involved in this. Maybe eventually, but for all this time, what are these Muslims doing? Looking the other way? See, this is the part that has to change. We can talk all we want about fighting ISIS and going over there and putting boots on the ground, which I'm a fan of, and there's stories out there. We're sending people back to Iraq. I wonder how liberals feel about that. We can talk all about that. But we can use the example of what happens in inner city communities in the United States. What's going on there these days is similar to what I'm talking about regarding this Abdus-Salam and him being in this Muslim neighborhood and nobody saying anything. We know that in inner cities across the United States that it is not looked upon as being very good. You're not seen to be as a moral person if you're going to be nice to the police and try to help them solve crimes that happen in the inner city. You can see that. You don't need to be a cop to know that. You can watch a show like The First 48 or any other sort of cop show and any documentary that's done about law enforcement in the United States, and you know that's true. In fact, you could probably go back to the days of when Cops was the show. They don't do that show anymore, but there's cameramen that follow cops around and the problems that policemen have solving crimes in the inner city because people just won't talk. And what happens is the crime just continues. Even though the murder rate and the violent crime statistics have gone down in the overall United States, really haven't changed in most inner cities in the United States. Hasn't changed. And unfortunately, we just haven't been able to change that in the United States. But this Muslim situation is like that. That we can talk. The difference is in the inner city, it's all about robbing people for money, stealing cars, things like that. But with Muslims, it's about blowing up stadiums and shooting up cafes just to scare people. All of it is violent crime, but it's safe to say that I think what these Muslim terrorists have done is somewhat more random, much more unpredictable than the crime that we experience in the inner cities in the United States today. Somehow we have to break through that. We haven't been able to do it with inner cities. Somehow we have to figure out how to do it with Muslims in the United States. That, as an American, if you hear this story, you're probably happy. Happy that this guy got caught. But then you have to start thinking about, well, maybe that's going on here. Maybe there are Muslims who would never think about killing a person, blowing a person up, anything like that, but they'll protect their own. They're peaceful Muslims, but if a violent Muslim moves in here from some other country, moves into the apartment next door, across the street, wherever, encounters that person, wherever, and just kind of get the feeling, oh, yeah, that this guy is that, and they don't say anything, we have to encourage them to say something. But I just don't. That's what drives us nuts, us non-Muslims, about Muslims who we know are good people, but we also know that they may know more than they're saying. And in fact, something like the San Bernardino shooting, there's still a lot of that suspicion going on with that. That you had two Muslims, a man and a woman, who were stalking all of this these guns, bomb-making materials, people over there late at night. And of course, we know what happened after that. Somebody down the street said, well, we didn't want to say anything because, we didn't want to profile. Remember, that's those stories that came out in San Bernardino after that shooting happened. Well, hey, what about the Muslims that might have seen all this going on? How about maybe their Muslim friends or people they ran into at the local mosque who, once again, would never do anything like what those two did in San Bernardino? But maybe just kind of said, well, I don't know, we're not supposed to do that. Maybe they're afraid or whatever the case may be. Because we know it's going on. So in the United States, we can feel as good as we want about this guy getting caught. We just have to realize that there could be communities in the United States that are harboring somebody like this guy who just might be planning something like the Paris attack. I know that sucks. I'm not here to scare you. But in a country of 300-some million people, to think that only 2 people in San Bernardino were planning a terrorist attack with guns, it's just not realistic. If that they were the only 2. The odds are there are probably others. Maybe they just haven't gotten around to it. Maybe they think that the police might be on to them and they've kind of cooled down their plans. Who knows? Of course, that's why I tell all of you, I've told you, the Paris attack was the final straw that broke the camel's back as far as me finally buying a gun and getting a gun and arming myself. Took a few months to happen. Had to figure out what gun I wanted to get. And then the San Bernardino shooting only made it all happen quicker. But that's why I did what I did. And because that was going through my mind that, well, there's these guys, a man and a woman in San Bernardino doing this, that did this, then it's pretty likely there's some other people planning something. They're just waiting for the right time. And that's why we have to continue to work on good Muslims in the United States to reassure them that you telling us this is good for everybody. The only people it's not good for are the people who want to do the attack. For everybody else, it's great. You have to stop thinking that you're doing your religion a favor, your community a favor by keeping your mouth shut. Because it seems here in Belgium that those people in that area, they are experts at keeping their mouth shut. I mean, that's, like I said, it's surprising. These cops weren't even looking to find this guy. They just happened upon him. Luckily, no cops were killed in the apprehension of this guy. Only a couple of his terrorist cohorts were killed. Very fortunate. So, Salah Abdeslam. If you remember him, if you don't remember him, I think that he was the guy who, leading up to the bombing, at least his social profile, I guess the personality he had, nobody would have thought that he would be engaged. He was maybe involved in some prostitution, male prostitution, liked to go to the nightclubs, kind of this outgoing guy, and then all of a sudden, he's involved with this terrorist attack. And that's what's so tough about this. That none of these people involved necessarily fit the profile. You can't judge these people by what they do in their everyday lives. Look at San Bernardino. Guy has a good job working for the city of San Bernardino, doing this, doing that. Then what do you know? He's shooting up a Christmas party, whatever that team building event, Christmas party, whatever it was. One day working for the city, the next with his coworkers, the next day shooting his coworkers. So you have to teach these Muslims, these peaceful Muslims, that if they hear something, say something. I got to go to the break. You're listening to the Dental Domain on Red State Talk Radio.
Talk radio the way the founding fathers would have done it.
I'm just a man trying to make his mark on history.
Red State Talk Radio.
Accuracy and range are a necessity. Now comfort is an option as well. Nemo Arms introduces the Omen 300 Win Mag. The Omen 300 is perfectly balanced for reduced recoil, creating sub-minute of angle accuracy. And fit for the tightest of tolerances. The Omen is offered in carbine or full-length models with a 10 or 14-round magazine. American-made, owned, and designed. Nemo Arms is setting a new standard in modern sporting rifles. Find out more at nemoarms.com.
Less than 2% of America's population volunteers to defend our nation. Though we rarely see them, we live the benefits of these heroes' sacrifices in the freedom we know and the safety we feel. Each and every day, the Gary Sinise Foundation serves our nation by honoring our defenders, veterans, first responders, and their families. We do this by creating and supporting unique programs designed to entertain, educate, inspire, strengthen, and build communities. The Gary Sinise Foundation has grown because the need has never been greater. Together, we'll improve the lives of thousands of American heroes and their families day in, day out, all year long. While we can never do enough to show our gratitude to our nation's defenders, our veterans, our first responders, and the families who stand by them, we can always do a little more. Join us. Visit GarySiniseFoundation.org.
Hi, I'm Gil Fulbright. The people who run my campaign, they've made this commercial, and I'm in it. This campaign, it's not about me. It's about crafting a version of me that'll appeal to you. A version that visits random work sites with paid actors pointing at things. A version of me that doesn't find old people loathsome or pointless. Has a conventionally attractive yet curiously still family. Listening to my constituents, legislating, these are things I don't do. What I do is spend about 70% of my time raising funds for re-election. I'd do anything to stay in office. My name's Gil Fulbright, but hell, I'll change my name to Phil Goldbright, or Bill Fulbright, or fill up my mouth with farts. These are the things that are important to me. And these are the fine people that finance my campaign. Now, in order to do these things, I have to stay in office. And to stay in office, I have to keep these guys happy. Now, if any of these things make these guys unhappy, well, my hands are tied. So come November, the choice is clear. Do you want another spineless mouthpiece for special interest in lobbyists? Or a spineless mouthpiece for special interest in lobbyists? I'm Philip a Mouth with Farts, and I approve this message.
And we are back at the Dental Domain on Red State Talk Radio. Thank you for listening tonight. Where do I want to go next? John Kasich. Interesting article, and this is something we need to keep in mind that hopefully will be good for Ted Cruz and his chance to keep the nomination, at least Donald Trump, from getting the total delegates that Trump would need to win the Republican nomination. John Kasich keeps talking about how he's going to go the whole way to the convention. The problem is, as has been stated, he may run out of money before the end of this month. And it doesn't seem like that is a point that John Kasich is talking about or wants to think about. He's certainly not bringing it up because at this point, who is contributing to John Kasich's candidacy? Who? I don't know. I don't think that, for example, I don't think the Bush people are people who were supporting George W. Bush or Jeb Bush. All those people that raised all that money, I don't think that they've automatically shifted their finances over to John Kasich. Why would they? They already lost so much money with Jeb Bush. Now, I'm going to say politically that might possibly, happen. But really the money that would keep John Kasich in the race from now to August, I mean, that's a little crazy. I think that's a little crazy. So, and truthfully, John Kasich, despite him winning his home state, has gotten his butt kicked everywhere else. And so he's not that popular. He's not that's the other point about this. He's not that popular. So there's only so many people that he's going to be able to raise money from anyway. And he's been out of step with, I think his ideas are out of step with your average Republican anyway, despite him winning Ohio. That it's hard for me to understand how he sticks around very long unless he himself is willing to go so deep into debt that he would have to file for bankruptcy after it was all over. I should also add that this past weekend he rejected any talk of him being somebody's vice presidential candidate. And it wasn't in the context of, well, he's going to drop out. And it was just simply, he's just not interested in it. I don't think that he's staying in this to be Trump or Ted Cruz's vice presidential pick. Frankly, I don't see either of them picking him. Of course, for different reasons. Of course, we know that Ben Carson, it seems, is vying to be Donald Trump's vice presidential pick. If Ben Carson couldn't ruin his reputation anymore, that would be, I should say, when you didn't think that Ben Carson couldn't ruin his reputation anymore, then he starts talking about vying and wanting to be Donald Trump's vice presidential pick. So I don't know where John Kasich thinks he is going with all of this. He's going to get his butt kicked tomorrow in Utah. Of course, Donald Trump is really going to get his butt kicked tomorrow in Utah. I don't believe that John Kasich, the only factor that John Kasich is going to play in Arizona is keeping probably Ted Cruz from winning that state. That's a possibility. But I'm not even sure he's sticking around just to ruin it for Ted Cruz. He's just kind of sticking around for the heck of it. All I would say is all you people who are throwing money and volunteering for John Kasich, you're wasting your time. There are probably better ways. If you feel like volunteering for an organization in your time and you have free time like that, you're better off getting involved with the Big Brothers and Big Sisters or something like that. That at this point is going to go way farther than volunteering for a candidate who may run out of money in the next 10 days. And this is just one more sign that what people have said about John Kasich for a long time, that in person, not in person, but on TV in these debates, talks about everybody getting together, but behind the scenes, he's been known as one of the biggest jerks around. There are several stories like that. Now, I'm not saying he needs to drop out and get on the Cruz train and throw his endorsement. I don't even care about that. But he's just going to go broke. That's the other point that we tend to forget about. That just because a guy tends to stay in and he's been getting his butt kicked and everything doesn't mean he can keep doing that forever. At some point, people are going to start to say, this is just a big waste of time. And I'd add, he still has less delegates than Marco Rubio. So, John Kasich, what a piece of work. I don't know. This is one, I think I've said this months ago when John Kasich got into the race, and he's the one that's changed, right? We haven't changed. I mean, 20 years ago, he was like a conservative rock star. Now, 20 years later, he's talking about Obamacare not being so bad and expanding Medicaid. He's the one that's changed, right? Not us. I keep trying to tell myself that. And for those of you who weren't old enough to remember when John Kasich was in the House and he was one of Newt Gingrich's right-hand guys, you should go back and check that out. You would think that those two guys are two totally separate John Kasichs. That's how big of a difference there is. So I can only hope that he runs out of money. I can only hope that after tomorrow that he drops out, but that's probably not going to happen. Obama going to Cuba. This is a topic that's interesting because it kind of divides us on the right, and it also divides people on the left. Not too many topics do that in the United States. And it all comes down to how you view Cuba. Do you want to continue to hold a grudge against it? And I'm not saying there's not a good reason to do that. There are a lot of reasons to dislike Cuba for the last 50 years, over 50 years, 55, 60 years. There's a lot of reasons to not like it. And of course, those people who are Cuban, I'm not Cuban, so I can't speak for them, but they are the ones that feel the most deeply about this particular topic. But Barack Obama's there. He's trying to establish some sort of ties with Cuba. And if you watched this week and you know the stories that before he got there, the Cuban police were out there taking all the people off the streets and trying to clean everything up and put the best face on all of this. No different. You know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of what the Nazis did before the 1936 Olympics in Berlin. They in almost overnight, they changed their country from a Nazi state, this very closed society, anti-Semitic society, into looking like the most open society of all. And then as soon as the Olympics were over, it went back to its old ways, and we know what happened after that. That's kind of what I think of when I hear these stories about Cuba cleaning its self up before Barack Obama gets there. My opinion is that we've been disconnected from Cuba for too long. I know that's tough for many Cubans, families who fled that country. I know it's tough for them to think that way. I know, obviously, that Ted Cruz doesn't feel that way. Marco Rubio doesn't feel that way. There's many Cubans here in Florida that don't feel that way. Just coincidentally, this place that my dad and I have gone to get ice cream a couple times while he's been here, it's run by a couple Cubans, and they've been talking about it, and they hate Castro, and they don't think that the United States should resume ties. They all have very, very good reasons, but the problem is they're not unbiased. They're very biased. They start thinking about what their families had to go through. Maybe they even had some family members who were thrown in jail, a grandfather, great-grandfather, grandmothers, who knows who else, maybe even some executions here and there. I'm not here to dismiss their feelings, okay? But my fear is with terrorism the way it is in the 21st century, that we don't need a country that's so close to us to be such an enemy. Frankly, the embargo that we've had against Cuba has not worked. I know that it seems like it was good in principle back in the 1960s, but it hasn't changed anything. The problem is nobody else went along with us on it. Maybe a couple countries did, but for the most part, the rest of the world could go to Cuba with no problems whatsoever. Canadians, the British, Mexico, French, and all of those other countries kept that country going, kept Cuba going. And I worry about the Chinese, what they're thinking about. I think about terrorism. And I think, it's time. I don't want to hear how bad this regime is. Once again, I understand what Cubans, how they feel. But the United States is friends with a lot of countries who've done a lot of bad things. The countries that don't hold our values necessarily. We get along with Saudi Arabia despite what Saudi Arabia has done, despite a few of the 9/11 hijackers being from there. We continue to be friends with them as best as we can for multiple reasons. That's the way I think eventually we're going to have to look at Cuba. That it's too close for us to be fought against, to be not ignored, but to be, not have diplomatic relations in any way with it. It just is, it's just a little, I think it's just a little bit weird that we continue to hold on to this so long. Something that hasn't worked. Now, it very well may be that if we open up the floodgates between Cuba and the United States, and there's going to be a lot of Cubans coming here, which is fine with me because a lot of them tend to be anti-communists, and Cubans are, I think, overwhelmingly Republican in this country, much more than any other Hispanic group, because they've lived under communism for so long and lived under the Castros. But I think it's just time. I think that we need to give some other plan a shot. I think that when this embargo started, that we thought we could kind of freeze out Cuba, and then maybe there'd be another revolution. Of course, we know we tried that with the CIA, the Bay of Pigs, and all that didn't go well. And we maybe thought, well, maybe over time, a lot of these regimes would fall. Maybe we saw what went on in some of the countries in Central America and South America with them overthrowing dictators and becoming more democratic. We thought that might happen. We've given it time to. We've given that experiment, I think, enough time. It's time to try something else. It's time to try a different experiment, and that is one that is open with Cuba. You're getting Americans going down there for tourism, for business. Because that's eventually, you have to remember something, that's eventually what happened between the Soviet Union and the United States. The reason we had so many problems with the Soviet Union is because we didn't do business with them. And as soon as we started to do that under Ronald Reagan, dealing with Gorbachev, it just made it all fall apart. It was one of the big reasons that it happened. And I like to remind you, imagine if we didn't have business relationship with China. Where would we be today? You think that we have problems with China now in the South China Sea. What do you think would have been going on for the last 40 years? It would have been a lot worse than it has been. Would have been a lot worse. We'd have been closed out from that country, billion people building up their military. That's dangerous. We're doing business with them, and that's what scares so much of us conservatives about tariffs on their goods. It sounds like we'd be going in the opposite direction in our dealing with them. That sounds like we're going more in the United States-Soviet relationship instead of a more open relationship. And I think it's about time we start treating Cuba like we treat China. It's a communist dictatorship in China. But we found a way to deal with them to the point where peace can be kept. Our people get along. There's an open communication line. And with China, we just don't have any of that. And then add on top of that it's a small country. It's a poor country where, for example, terrorists might find a home. and planning something about going into the United States. I guess it's a modified version of what happened with the Russian Soviet missiles being put in Cuba back in the early 60s. We want to avoid something like that in the 21st century where terrorists try to do that. Mm-hmm. So I, as a conservative, I'm not as upset about us dealing with Cuba. I don't feel like we've lost this. I know that's the way it's portrayed. Well, us finally giving in, it's showing that we're losing. I don't think that at all. I know that if I was president and started thinking about opening up negotiations with Cuba and changing our policy, it would not be anything about, well, I guess that we've lost it. It's just that what we've tried to do hasn't worked. Our goal is still that we want the Cuban people to be free. Our goal is still that we want elections there and things like that, and freedom of speech, freedom of religion, capitalism and all things. It's just we might have to change the way we go about it. The goal is still the same. We lose when we give up that goal. And we just say, well, it's just going to be the way it's going to be and forget it. I should remind you, that should be our goal with China and all these other countries that we deal with that aren't democratic and don't have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and all that. It should always be the goal. The goal is to do business with them for peaceful reasons, to keep the communications line open, to keep us friendly. But our goal is always to bring free elections and freedom and capitalism and freedom of religion, freedom to organize, private property rights to all of these countries. That's always the goal. And sometimes you have to switch up tactics to do that. Let's not forget the goal, people. Let's not get so caught up in us losing, us winning, like Donald Trump likes to talk about. So put me on the side of we need to open it up a little bit more. So let me go to one more thing that I just could not believe before I leave you for tonight. Sharon Angle is going to run for the Senate again in Nevada. If you Nevadans, and I don't live there anymore, but I can speak to Nevadans because I lived there for 13 and a half years, got to know many of them, still call many of them my friends. You Nevadans cannot be believing this, right? For you conservatives, you Republicans in Nevada, I just talked about Sharon Angle not too long ago on this show. And I never thought that I'm not going to say I never thought, but I didn't think I'd be talking about her again so soon. I certainly didn't think I'd be talking about her in the context that she wants to run for the Senate again. Now, the good news is I think that there are a couple Republicans who have a better line on getting the nomination. One of them, Joe Heck, is already represents Nevada in the House of Representatives. I don't know how conservative he is, unfortunately. But Sharon Angle, I just want to remind all of you, terrible candidate. I was looking through what they were saying about her, and I forgot all of this. I remember now, but I forgot all of this. All this stuff about she wanted to ban alcohol. That was something that she brought up at one time. During her campaign, she never wanted to talk to the media. She kind of flirted around with talked about Scientology, which I know a little bit about since Clearwater, Florida is the capital of Scientology in the world. She's just kooky. And I hope that she gets stopped early in the process. So you can look for that story out there wherever. But you've been listening to The Dental Domain on Red State Talk Radio. You can email me at edwarddenzel@reagan.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Dental Domain, all one word, no space in between. edwarddenzel.com is where you can find all of my old Red State Talk Radio shows. You can find them at Podomatic, Podbean, SoundCloud, YouTube. You go to edwarddenzel.com/book to download for free the first chapter of my next book called The Comebacks. You can also find me on Facebook and LinkedIn. It's been a pleasure talking to you tonight. You've been listening to The Dental Domain on Red State Talk Radio.